Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, after years of seeing federal white-collar crime cases raised against politicians, this week we saw the state get into the action as a grand jury issued a 22-count indictment against St. Bernard Parish President Dave Peralta. We'll examine the case tonight, as well as the latest about the Jindal presidential campaign, exploring super PACs, the Dome at 40 as a study in politics, Copelands goes into the hotel business, and our Future Watch segment examines a program to help math, science, and technology students succeed. In the number for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. David Hammer, reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Stephanie Grace, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. And we are to Stephanie first, because Governor Jindal was on the national stage yesterday, albeit Tier 2.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah. How did it go?
Well, I think the fact that he was not in Tier 1 is a very big problem for him, because Tier 1, that was the debate last night with Donald Trump and the big Fox News personalities and all the top candidates, was a sensation, I have to say, a rating sensation. 24 million people watched it. That's record-setting for cable news. It's the kind of audience you get for big, not Super Bowl, but other big sporting events, you know, Major League playoffs and Sunday Night Football. And because of, we've talked about this before, Fox News came up with this cutoff of 10 candidates because there are 17 candidates. It's unwieldy. You can't have a debate with 17. You couldn't really do it with 10.
Yeah, it was kind of tough.
But the bottom 7, according to national polls, got to go in the afternoon on a separate debate. So Governor Jindal was part of that. And it was, you know, it was okay. He got his talking points in. It was a bit of a weird crowd because there were some candidates trying to be taken very seriously. Carly Fiorina actually did very well, got a lot of buzz. He got some buzz for saying some things that maybe we've heard him say before that national people haven't, like about immigration. He said immigration without assimilation is invasion. That went around the internet. You know, but there are also a couple ex-governors who are just running, you know, they're like the Buddy Romers of this cycle. You remember Buddy Romer ran 4 years ago and no one really paid any attention.
So his demeanor, just the way he presents himself and carries himself, how do you think that went across to the voter who maybe is not familiar with him?
You know, he's not great on TV. He is terrific in small settings and Q&A with voters. What they will tell you, and what I would think is true, is they're pursuing a small state strategy. He's spending a lot of time in Iowa, New Hampshire. Iowa in particular has a lot of Christian conservatives, and doing these one-on-one events, and he does very well, and people like him in that setting. And but on TV, you know, he can come across as very dogmatic, kind of programmed, and he really is very diligent about sticking to his talking points, but he just kind of fires them out. And
as far as his performance yesterday, what I've read, just a few things, is that Fiorina sort of took it. She was strong. But he's being graded pretty well, too.
In this, yes, against this other group. And you had Rick Perry, who, you know, fumbled a little, as he often does. You know, it was interesting until the big show started, and then nobody cared anymore.
Is there any thought to the idea that, you know, big fish, small pond, you can distinguish yourself a little bit more if you're in the smaller group and you're not all the air gets sucked out by Trump and Bush. And
I think that's what happened with Carly Fiorina. I think maybe one person can emerge, and again, she's just very charismatic. Of the candidates who are not in politics, she's one of 3. She's the one who kind of seems to know what politicians do more than Donald Trump and Ben Carson. And even at the beginning of the big debate, Megyn Kelly, one of the moderators, gave her a shout out for how well she did at the earlier debate. So if anyone kind of is able to rise, I think it's going to be her. Also, the fact that she's the only woman to the main stage.
When this thing was conceptualized, we talked about it, I was thinking, this doesn't make any difference. It's so early. It's even before the Iowa primaries in New Hampshire. It's not going to make any
6
difference.
Months before, yeah.
And it shouldn't have, but it did.
It did.
Because, and that was the surprise, it was because of Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump that made the second debate a big debate last night.
But what happens, the kind of outcome of that is because people turned in to watch Donald Trump, they saw Marco Rubio and they saw John Kasich.
And you may see people getting out earlier than they would have otherwise.
And you may also see people getting big donations or kind of getting, I mean, Marco Rubio, if you kind of follow what the reviews, Marco Rubio, I think people thought did very well. I hear he's getting phone calls from billionaires now, you know, all these
and
people.
he didn't take a single drink of water.
He didn't. He made the quip, though, that Donald Trump could write him a check, too, right?
Exactly.
As he said, he'd written to everybody on the stage in the past. It was an amusing debate.
It was.
But as far as back to Bobby Jindal,
Yes.
I mean, what he's saying, what is he disclosing about what would be a Jindal presidency should it happen?
Well, again, very, very conservative. That's the niche he's going for, and he's really pushing it because so many other candidates, you know, one of his problems from yesterday is, you know, everything he's trying to do, somebody else is trying to do. They even use some of the same lines. Ted Cruz was talking about radical Islam and how the president doesn't like to use that term. Bobby Jindal's going really hard on Planned Parenthood since those videos have come out. He, as we know, has kind of taken some state action against local Planned Parenthood. But he said at this debate he would have the IRS go after Planned Parenthood. He would have the Department of Justice, other agencies, any agency he could think of. I mean, he's to the point where some people were saying, "Oh, Bobby Jindal would commit an impeachable offense on his first day," because you really can't do that. But and this is also someone who has criticized the IRS for targeting conservative groups. So there's a little bit of a, is that hypocritical question there.
So when is the next debate? It's a CNN debate,
The next
right?
debate is CNN, and it's the same rules, top 10, and it's in September. And what I'm hearing is based on the ratings from last night, CNN is now very excited.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot more of Trump because it's good TV.
It is good TV. Any chance, do you think, that Governor Jindal could make it to that top tier by next month? What will it take?
It's hard because it's national polls, and again, if you consider the people who tuned into this thing, the people who are interested, they didn't get to see him against everybody else, and they didn't get to see, how he looked next to Scott Walker, and there were so many people. They kept calling out people you forgot they were there. So to kind of think, oh wait, there are other people I need to think about too. That's just that's a lot to ask of people, I think.
Well, as Errol pointed out, it's just beginning. We'll be seeing a lot more. Okay,
yes.
Stephanie, thanks. David, over to you. Another indictment for the St. Bernard Parish President.
Yes, this whole Dave Peralta story is such a confusing web, and it's been going on for so long. He's got 4 indictments in 3 different parishes. One of them had charges withdrawn on the sex charges in St. Bernard, and then they come back in the St. Bernard court on Wednesday and indict him on 22 counts that are essentially malfeasance and abuse of office charges. But the thing that I think really was distinguishable about these charges and why it was so interesting was that the acts that they're detailing in this indictment went right up until like 2 weeks ago. So even among all of these problems and with everybody feeling like this is an embarrassment and pressure for him to resign and him refusing to, he was continuing, according to the indictment, allegedly, to continue to do these acts while all this was going on.
Like what? Can you describe, sort of generally what these 22 counts, you mentioned malfeasance, what else?
Obstruction of justice, malfeasance in office, abuse of power, and a lot of it focused on the way he was trying to allegedly control people in his government, make them do his bidding, to find his ex-wife Sharon Schaefer, to send messages, to
post internet comments even.
Exactly. And back to the whole NOLA.com internet post issue,
Yes.
It's like a blast from the past. But they also had this issue with 2 of his top appointees and one of his really close allies for a long time, Donnie Bourgeois, who used to be in his inner circle. He accuses him of stealing $350,000 and using a parish car to go to one of his campaign opponents' offices on parish time, and says that's why he fired him, but the indictment says he fired him because he was testifying against him in this case. And then you have Jeff Brannon, who's the IT manager, who was also fired, and Peralta says that was for cause too, and puts out an affidavit on Wednesday saying Brannon had downloaded Somali torrents that were used to break into, hack into the email system, and that's why some of the nasty messages to his ex-wife went out. He didn't write those. Those were actually basically planted by Brannon, his claim is. So it just gets more salacious by the day, and it all kind of stems from the sex charges, but now we've moved completely away from sexual assault, because I think he was getting a little bit of support in the community from people, the idea that, hey, he said something to the effect of nobody has normal sex anymore, and the fact that my wife and ex-wife and I, plain vanilla, my ex-wife and I were using these contraptions and what have you, she's trying to get back at me now, is not anything of any consequence as a governing, as the president of this parish.
Will he step down though?
But he refuses to. No. He refuses to. He's adamant about it. But then the other interesting thing about Wednesday is that he ends up getting handcuffed and actually brought to jail, and had to bond out of jail, unlike the other situations where he was charged in Baton Rouge and on the North Shore. He was given an opportunity to turn himself in and go through a very kind of regular process for white-collar crime. Here, he's actually handcuffed. Sheriff's deputies bring him out of court right in front of the cameras, and he's got that embarrassment.
And counsel has called for him to step down.
They have, but they've done it before. And, this IT situation is really interesting because there's this battle over the IT contractor, Paratech, that he brought in. The council's trying to get them banned, or has said that they should be banned from the building. He says they've got a legitimate contract that I let, and they can do this work. And now you actually have one of the charges against him is related to the owner of that company, Richard Pernicero, payments to him, and also to one of his top appointees, Jared Gurgis, who is the road department superintendent, who was also charged in a separate indictment also on Wednesday in the same courtroom, 5 counts, also malfeasance charges, and some charges related to a story that I broke the night before about Mr. Gurgis, who had jobs as both the sheriff's deputy and the road department superintendent simultaneously. I went through his timesheets, and interestingly, Peralta had introduced a new thing in January saying that even salaried employees had to punch in and out on time clocks. Well, those time clocks showed that Mr. Gurgis was working for the sheriff's office at the exact same time that he was supposedly working for the road department.
The thing about stepping down, he'd lose a strategic bargaining tool if he'd step down. Yeah. I mean, if it comes down to a plea bargain, that could be part of the deal. And so he doesn't want to give up his biggest strength right there.
And also, he's going to seek re-election. He says that he is still going to seek re-election.
Exactly.
And he also says that he's just not guilty of any of this.
Right.
Correct.
All of these charges
Correct.
are just
and
wrong.
He says the other thing that was brought a new level to all this is that he says this is all being directed by my predecessor, Craig Tafaro. Mr. Gurgis was the one who did the raid on Tafaro's storage unit, and this, he's saying it's Tafaro and his relationship with the Attorney General is the reason that they're doing a witch hunt on me.
Okay, it's really entwined and complex and a big network of things to look at. Okay, thanks a lot, David.
However, a lot of attorneys will be being at Rocky and Carlos.
It's right there next to the courthouse.
And politics is all entwined in this, and you say politics is also part of the history of the Dome.
Well, in a good sort of way. I was thinking that this was the anniversary of the Superdome, 40th anniversary, and it happens the same week that we saw the first opening of part of the University Hospital. I was thinking there were some real parallels, because both in their time were like huge public building projects. They're both among the biggest projects in the country. They were both heavily criticized when they were being planned and when they were being built. They were both built in blighted areas. And we hope that 40 years from now they'll look back at the hospital and say it had the same impact that the Superdome did. But they're two neighborhoods that almost touch each other. But you look at the Dome. What inspired the Dome, of course, was the Astrodome in Houston. But the Astrodome was, as Dome Stadiums went, was rather a cheaply constructed dome. And other domes were built around the same time. The Superdome, the King Dome in Seattle, in Minneapolis, they built what became the Hubert Humphrey Dome. And all the others did it on the cheap. And in New Orleans, they didn't. That they built a big multi-purpose dome, which is one thing people were criticizing them for. So why don't you do it on the cheap? I mean, why are you doing this elaborate dome? But our dome, the King Dome and the Hubert Humphrey Dome were pancaked. They don't even exist. The Astrodome is just a bit of the old dome is left, and if you see what's left of it next to Reliant Stadium in Houston, it looks like a thimble. So our dome is the only dome that's really persevered and survived. it didn't meet all expectations. Like people were saying, "Oh, it's going to be Mardi Gras every day. There's going to be festivals and circuses," and it was a little bit too big for some things. I remember the first time Ringling Brothers came. The big Ringling Brothers circus looked dwarfed in there, and so the second time they came, they had to hang a curtain, and so they could just use part of their. It was never that great for concerts, and unless it was a really big concert.
NBA games.
I feel like it was kind of ahead of its time in some ways, and it missed the boat. If it had some Final Fours and stuff there, and you felt like you were so far away from the court with basketball with just 10 guys playing in such a small space. But then now you have those games going on in the Cowboys Stadium in Texas, and it's enormous, and they've got those huge video screens, and the Superdome never upgraded those video screens. There's the tiniest screen.
When the Jazz played there, I mean, you had all those seats. I mean, you could get into a Jazz game in the upper ref for $5, and it said NBA attendance record, 70,000 people saw this game. And so, in that sense, but where the Dome obviously has been a huge success was at football, and even at that, the 3 points to the building was supposed to be the Saints, of course, and we wouldn't have a Saints franchise were not for the Dome. The Saints exist because of the promise of the Dome. The Sugar Bowl, which is still survives. Tulane football, and to his credit, Tulane came in as part of the deal. It didn't work that well for Tulane over the years. In fact, it probably hurt Tulane football, and we saw this year it moved to another stadium. But look what else happened, though, with 7 Super Bowls, with the whole concept of the Bowl Championship Series and national championship games, and then once the Saints became successful, and I was thinking, and David, maybe you can think of something, that when it was being built, people were saying, this is going to be a big boondoggle, people are going to steal from it, and I can't think of any major scandal ever. At the very beginning, there was a little bit about janitorial contracts or something, but I can't think of any major scandal that was ever associated with it.
Right, and there's kind of ancillary stuff with the Benson Tower and stuff like that, and the deal with the rework deal, but I can't think of it. And there was a Republican National Convention there in 1988 that did really well.
That's right, and that was the one where George Bush said, read my lips, none of the taxes. But one point that I really want to mention, because I think this was brilliant, we always criticize Louisiana politics, but I think this was brilliant. One is that we built it downtown, which a lot of cities didn't do. Right. But the other is that the Dome was paid for fairly quickly, and they refinanced the Dome bonds, and that's what built the arena, and Zephyr Stadium and the Hilario Center. And then also with the arena, the Dome provided the parking and the air conditioning capacity. I think that was brilliant. I think that was like textbook example.
And we have to wrap up this segment right now too and move on to the next one. The Dome does sort of remain the grand dame of domes. It really is
the grand dame of domes, yes.
Okay, Future Watch STEM is a program over at UNO to keep students in the program.
It's called STEM Scholars, and STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Nationwide, according to the White House study, only 40% of the entry-level freshman college students who go into a STEM career end up getting the degree and graduating with such a career path. So UNO just received a 5-year, $1.5 million grant to try to keep their STEM students on that track. And they started this week with a STEM Scholars boot camp, for lack of a better word. The people, that's about 10% of the incoming freshman STEM students. 45 students are on campus for 5 days, taking classes in biology, algebra, or calculus. They're actually meeting the professors, taking small classes, learning study skills, taking exams. None of it, the grades don't count, but it's a way to get familiar with the system, become successful, and have an early relationship with the professors, with the system, to then therefore be able to stay on that track for longer and graduate. These are people with degrees in things like, who end up ultimately with degrees in things like engineering, biology, psychology, computer science, civil, mechanical, and environmental engineering. So, and 80% or more of UNO's students are from the metro area. So besides being a job training for the nation, it's really local job training boost if this works, to keep those students on track and get them to graduate with their degrees. They go on, most of the engineering students go right to jobs out of college, and the biology and other majors maybe go to med school or dental school or physical therapy school or nursing school. And there is, nationwide, there is a plethora of STEM-based careers available, jobs available, and there's a shortage of people who are trained for those careers. So the goal is to get those kids who have declared, this is what I want to do with my life, to actually go from point A to point B and get there successfully.
So is this boot camp, is it for incoming students or students who are already
incoming freshmen? 45 incoming freshmen started this Wednesday. They'll be at UNO through Monday in this first program. But the program should go on for the next 5 years and see how successful it is. It's at least funded for the next 5 years, and we'll go on beyond that.
Okay, sounds good. I wish them all luck, too. Thanks a lot, Don.
And it's good to hear good news about UNO, too.
That's right. Definitely always good news to hear about, good news about UNO. All right, super PACs and the governor's race. Okay, super PAC, what is it exactly?
Okay,
just quickly,
super
if you can explain that.
Based on this big Supreme Court decision a number of years ago, there are now these entities that are allowed to take unlimited money from an individual donor. Pretty much undoes all of the Watergate reforms, the reforms we had here in Louisiana when Buddy Roemer, after Edwin Edwards was governor. More money than we've ever seen before is pouring into this governor's race. We haven't seen it on the street. We haven't seen it in the air yet. We will. David Vitter, way ahead of the pack, not surprisingly, although some of his competitors have some big contributions too. So we're seeing things like David Vitter got a $150,000 contribution from a guy in Mount Vernon, Ohio. He works for a big company that does produces equipment to extract natural gas, fracking. You have a guy who, named Jim Flores, who's donated $250,000 to the Scott Angel Super PAC. He's he's in Houston. He's head of Mac Moran Oil and Gas. All those people who think the oil and gas industry has too much political power, just wait, because this is something we've never seen before. In the past, contributions have been limited, $5,000, $10,000. This is, you can just write a big check.
So to the campaign,
and it's not to the campaign. No.
This is not to the campaign.
This is to, a super PAC is not supposed to coordinate with a campaign. Now, you have, this is what super PACs do. Bobby Jindal's super PACs, because it's happening at the presidential level, they're running ads on his behalf. They're staging his town hall meetings in Iowa. Its coordination is interestingly defined. In David Vitter's case, the super PAC is chaired by an ally and run by a former aide, but they are not coordinating.
So do all of the gubernatorial candidates have a super PAC?
David Vitter has one, Scott Angel has one, Jay Darden has one, John Bel Edwards, the Democrat, does not have one. There is one that's sort of allied with him, and it is called Gumbo PAC, and it's, if you've driven around and seen billboards that say ABV, anybody but Vitter, that's Gumbo PAC. Okay. So basically it is, it's really funded by some big trial lawyer firms, $50,000 donations from a couple of them. Herman Katz is the big local one behind it. And they are saying, anybody but Vitter, but they're also giving money to John Bel Edwards, the Democrat. So I think they're hedging their bets. They're saying, John Bel Edwards is our first choice, but David Vitter is our last choice.
So if you donate directly to a campaign, though, you're limited to what, $5,000
$5,000
as
yes.
an individual?
Yes.
So in our governor's race, with all of these super PACs, what is it going to make it look like, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because David Vitter is sitting on a lead in the polls and he's not doing much. So is there even enough airtime to suck up all this money? He's got about $9 million between the regular campaign and the super PAC.
What are the rules on that money if they don't use it in this election cycle?
I think he can just hold on to it. It's interesting. He was actually allowed, because he went to court, he was allowed to transfer his congressional campaign account into the super PAC. Congressional campaigns have much stricter rules than even state campaigns, but this is a way around it. He also went to court to remove a $100,000 per donation limit in Louisiana. He sued, he won, and he actually, the super PAC got the state to pay his lawyer fees because that's what happens. So there's a $70,000 entry in his form from the taxpayers of Louisiana. We paid for him to sue so he could do this. Jay Darden has made an issue of that, and the Democrats have made an issue of that now.
Was the last cycle the first one where they had the PAC money?
The last presidential debate.
The
last congressional.
The last state election.
We haven't had super PACs in state elections before. This is
really?
So this will be our first one.
Yes.
Okay. And so the super PAC, it can't coordinate with the campaign supposedly, but the super PAC, any kind of ads they produce, they can make it obvious that they are on behalf of that candidate, right?
You can't say vote for somebody. You can say, the Bobby Jindal one is a good ad. You can go online and see it. It's showing Bobby Jindal at town hall meetings. It's saying Bobby Jindal, is a good candidate. It's not saying vote for.
Okay.
And it says sponsored by Believe Again, which is the super PAC.
We'll be seeing more of it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
It's running in Iowa.
And Veterans Boulevard corridor is now going to be the shopping mecca.
Well, John Young, the parish president, was also running for lieutenant governor, was very proud this week. But the I think the big news this week was the Landmark Hotel was it's reopened and restored by the by the Copeland Corporation. Of course, it's headed by Al Copeland Jr., the founder's son, and he was very proud. He said, "My dad would be very proud of this." And so they've redone the hotel, and in conjunction with Best Western, it's going to be like a 3-star rated hotel, but it's going to have a nice ballroom upstairs and in restaurants, and they've added more rooms, and they've added some condos to it also. So I think it helps. That's a pretty key intersection right there, and so that'll help that. It's a place that always should have had a good hotel. But also in the last few weeks, you saw the Fresh Market open on Veterans, and then there's a Trader Joe's that's going to be opening on Veterans too. And then we already have Whole Foods and some other things. And for throwback, there's still Door Knocks.
There's still Door
Okay,
Knocks.
it's still there. Okay.
There's Bro Mart, there's Rouse's, there's all of them.
Bro Market. But the other thing that I think that's important is that no one ever accused Veterans Boulevard of being really beautiful.
Stylish.
Okay. And it's still not, but it's a lot better. There's been a lot of beautification along, I guess it's okay to call it neutral ground in Metairie, okay? But there's been a big neutral ground beautification area, and so it's a lot more pleasing, except for the Macy's parking lot on Veterans and Causeway, which is, by any standards, an ugly building, but they've put up some trees at least to try to do that. But the whole boulevard has looked better. It's a lot more pleasant, and you're just seeing this whole wave of new investment that's coming in there.
And certainly Trader Joe's is something that a lot of people have been waiting for a long time to have one finally here in the New Orleans Metro region. There's been one in Baton Rouge, but Trader Joe has really been highly anticipated. And as you said, now we have the Fresh Market along with Whole Foods, so it is a whole different experience now when you go down to Veterans Boulevard to do some shopping, at least some grocery shopping, definitely.
It is, and they've said that I guess it's true, that the corner of Veterans and Causeway is the most trafficked intersection in the state.
It's busy.
And so it should, that's a good place to develop.
It definitely is. Okay, it's now time to look ahead. Back to you.
Well, the wedding business is becoming a huge business in the New Orleans area. And Frommer's has done a report ranking the top wedding destinations in different states. And it came out this week. And it's Frommer's choice of the top wedding location, the hotel location in New Orleans, is the Degas House, which has redone itself to have made it better for parties and that sort of thing. And so national recognition for the Degas House.
It is a beautiful spot. David.
Well, last week I said how WWL-TV.com had a Katrina anniversary page, and we were going to be putting things up there. Just yesterday, we put up a whole series of really emotional videos from myself and my colleagues at WWL talking about various aspects of the storm. And I don't do this usually, but I guess I'll plug this book because it's really incredible. First of all, it's Gary Rivlin from the New York Times, or former New York Times reporter, did this book it's called Katrina. It's got a subtitle after the flood, but it is really quite comprehensive and impressive. So I've enjoyed reading it, and anybody who wants to look back, I recommend it.
Okay, David, thanks. Don.
I think you can expect to see paparazzi or somebody here over the next couple of weeks, because there are going to be a lot of star-studded events in relation to that Katrina anniversary. Habitat for Humanity's New Orleans Habitat is going to be raising some big money with the likes of Randy Newman and Emmylou Harris. There's a bunch of stuff going on, so I think locals might need to prepare for Katrina fatigue again.
Okay, Steph.
Okay, different topic. This Thursday, there are 2 public meetings on the Mayor Landrieu's proposal to get rid of some of the Confederate monuments, both at City Hall, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. If people want to talk about it, it seems like everybody wants to talk about it. You can come out to either one.
Okay, Stephanie, thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for watching, and we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.